My name is Essie, and I just turned 58 last month. Right now, I'm lying on my son's couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I ended up here after 35 years of marriage. The divorce papers still feel fresh in my hands. Yesterday, I watched my son Jason buy his mother in law a luxury apartment while he told me I should have stayed married if I wanted comfort. The irony cuts deeper than any knife. If you are watching this, please let me know where you are viewing from, hit that like button, and subscribe. I promise my story will make you reconsider what family really means. I met Frank when I was 22, fresh out of nursing school with dreams as big as the Montana sky. He was 26, a promising engineer with ambitious plans and a smile that made my heart skip beats. We married within a year of dating, both certain we had found our forever person. The early days were blissful, full of laughter, stolen kisses, and dreams of building a beautiful life together. When Jason was born 3 years later, I thought our happiness was complete. Frank would come home from work, scoop up our baby boy, and parade him around the living room like he was showing off the eighth wonder of the world. Those moments watching my husband bond with our son filled me with such profound joy that sometimes I would have to step into another room just to wipe away my tears. As the years passed, Frank climbed the corporate ladder with impressive speed. His talent for engineering and problem-solving made him invaluable to his company. Project after project, promotion after promotion, he became the breadwinner he had always wanted to be. I was proud of him. Truly, I was. But with each step up, he seemed to take 2 steps away from us. My nursing career, once a source of personal pride, gradually took a back seat to family responsibilities. With Frank traveling more frequently for work, someone needed to be there for Jason. I chose to reduce my hours, eventually working only part-time at the local clinic. Frank assured me it was temporary, that once he reached a certain level, things would stabilize. They never did. By the time Jason started elementary school, Frank was rarely home for dinner. Business trips stretched from days to weeks. When he was physically present, his mind seemed elsewhere, constantly checking emails or taking calls. Jason would ask when Daddy was coming to his baseball games or school performances, and I became skilled at crafting gentle excuses that protected both my son's feelings and my husband's reputation. I realize now that was when things began to change financially as well. Frank started taking complete control of our money. He opened separate accounts I had no access to, claiming it was easier for tax purposes given his corporate position. He gave me a monthly allowance for household expenses, and while it was generous enough, I felt increasingly uncomfortable having to ask my own husband for money if unexpected costs arose. When I broached the subject of returning to full-time nursing as Jason entered middle school, Frank dismissed the idea. He said my earnings would be insignificant compared to his, and that Jason still needed a parent at home. I remember the words that stung most. "We don't need the money, Essie. What we need is for you to keep things running smoothly here so I can focus on my career." So I did. I volunteered at Jason's school, joined the PTA, kept our home immaculate, prepared meals that often went uneaten as Frank came home later and later. I maintained friendships with other wives in similar situations, though our numbers dwindled as divorces scattered them to new cities and new lives. The last decade of our marriage felt like a slow dimming of lights. Frank became increasingly distant and critical. My cooking was too bland. The house was too cluttered. I had let myself go. I was boring. The criticisms came like tiny paper cuts, individually insignificant but collectively debilitating. When Jason left for college, I thought Frank and I might reconnect. Instead, the empty nest seemed to highlight the emptiness between us. Frank spent even more time at work, and his business trips multiplied. Sometimes he would be gone for 3 weeks at a time, calling sporadically with brief, distracted conversations. I found the first text message by accident. Frank had left his phone on the kitchen counter while showering, and it lit up with a notification. A woman named Amy sending a heart emoji and the words, "Miss you already." I put the phone down, told myself it was probably a colleague being friendly. I didn't want to be that suspicious, jealous wife. But once your eyes are open to the possibility, you start seeing clues everywhere. The late-night phone calls he took in the garage, the mysterious weekend conferences in cities just a few hours away, the new cologne, the gym membership after years of claiming he had no time for exercise. I suggested marriage counseling when Jason graduated from college. Frank laughed. actually laughed and said we didn't need some stranger telling us how to fix a marriage that wasn't broken. He said I was being dramatic, creating problems where none existed. 6 months before our 35th anniversary, Frank sat me down at our kitchen table. He looked more animated than he had in years, almost excited. "Essie," he said, "I'm thinking about early retirement." I was surprised, but pleased. Maybe this would give us time together finally. "That sounds wonderful," I replied. "We could travel, spend more time with Jason, maybe even consider that vacation home in Colorado we always talked about." Frank's smile faltered slightly. "Actually, I was thinking more along the lines of a fresh start, on my own." The words didn't compute at first. On his own. What did that mean? "I've given this company 30 years of my life," he continued. "I've given this marriage 35. I want the freedom to live the rest of my life on my terms. I think we should divorce, Essie. Amicably, of course." Amicably, as if he were suggesting we try a new restaurant rather than dismantle 3.5 decades of marriage. "Is there someone else?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "That's not the point," he replied, which was, of course, confirmation. "It's just time we both moved on. You'll be fine, Essie. The settlement will be fair." As I would soon discover, Frank and I had very different definitions of the word fair. I sat across from my lawyer, Martha, in her downtown office, still struggling to process what she had just told me. The financial documents spread across her desk told a story so different from the one I had believed for decades. "So, he's been moving money offshore?" I asked, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. Martha nodded, her expression grim. "For at least 7 years that we can trace. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers after Jason finished college. The accounts in the Cayman Islands alone hold nearly $2 million. $2 million that I had no idea existed. $2 million that were technically marital assets, but that Frank had hidden, planning his exit long before he ever said the word divorce." "Can we get it back?" I asked. Martha sighed. "We can try, but these accounts are deliberately designed to be difficult to access in divorce proceedings. Frank has clearly had professional guidance on how to shield these assets. Professional guidance, like the kind Amy might provide as a financial advisor at his firm. The affair that I had finally confirmed through hired investigators had apparently been going on for 3 years. Amy was 34, had never been married, and according to the private investigator's report, had been accompanying Frank on many of his business trips. The most painful revelation had been confronting Frank with what I knew. I had expected denial, perhaps even shame. What I got instead was cold indifference. "You were never interested in our finances, Essie," he said, as if my trust in him had been a character flaw. "You've been content to let me handle everything for 35 years. Why the sudden interest now?" "Because you're stealing from me," I replied, my voice shaking. Frank's laugh was dismissive. "I built this wealth. Every dollar we have came from my hard work while you played house. Consider whatever you get in the settlement a generous gift." That night, after Frank left to stay at a hotel, I cried until there were no tears left. Then I called Martha and told her to file for divorce immediately. The proceedings were ugly despite Frank's initial promise of amicability. His high-powered attorney fought tooth and nail against every claim I made. My requests for alimony were characterized as greedy and unreasonable. My contributions to our marriage as a homemaker and mother were dismissed as insignificant compared to Frank's career sacrifices. In the end, we had to sell our home, the one where we had raised Jason, the one where I had planted a garden each spring for 30 years. The proceeds were split, though not equally, after Frank's attorney successfully argued that his income had been the sole source of the mortgage payments. Frank kept his entire 401k and pension, arguing that since he had been the only one contributing to them, they were separate rather than marital property. My lawyer fought this, but the judge, a man about Frank's age, seemed sympathetic to his arguments. The settlement left me with enough to live modestly for a while, but not enough to buy another home in our expensive suburb. Rental prices had skyrocketed in recent years, and even a small apartment would consume a significant portion of my monthly income, which now consisted solely of the limited alimony Frank had been ordered to pay. I stayed at an extended stay hotel while searching for a permanent solution. Each day I scoured rental listings called property managers and visited apartments only to find that on paper I looked like a risk. No recent employment history, no rental history, limited income. At 58, I was starting from scratch in a world that seemed designed for younger people with established careers. After 2 weeks of searching and watching my savings dwindle on hotel costs, I realized I needed help. With tremendous reluctance, I called the one person I thought might understand. My son. "Mom, is everything okay?" Jason's voice on the phone sounded concerned but distant, as if he were taking my call from another room to avoid being overheard. "Everything's fine, sweetie," I lied, clutching the phone tighter. "I just wanted to catch up. It's been a while." 3 months, to be exact. 3 months since I had last spoken to my only child. He had called briefly after Frank told him about the divorce, a stilted, uncomfortable conversation where Jason had asked few questions and offered no support. "I'm actually heading into a meeting," Jason replied. "Can I call you back later?" "Of course," I said, then quickly added before he could hang up. "Actually, Jason, I was wondering if we could meet in person. There's something I'd like to discuss with you." The silence on the other end lasted just long enough to be painful. "Is this about the divorce?" he finally asked, his tone suddenly cooler. "Partly," I admitted. "I'm having some difficulty finding a place to live, and I thought maybe you could help me look at options or—" "You need money." The question was blunt, borderline accusatory. No, I said hastily, though financial help would certainly have been welcome. "I just thought you might have advice or maybe know someone in real estate who could help me find something affordable." Another pause. I could almost hear him weighing his options, calculating the minimum effort required to address the situation. "Why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow?" he finally offered. "We can talk then." Relief flooded through me. "That would be wonderful. Thank you, Jason." 6 o'clock, he said. "I'll let Natalie know." The call ended, and I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, feeling both grateful and humiliated. I had never imagined having to ask my son for help at this stage of my life. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. The next evening, I pulled up to Jason and Natalie's house in my aging sedan, suddenly conscious of how it looked parked next to their luxury vehicles in the circular driveway. Their home, a sprawling colonial in an exclusive gated community, always made me feel small somehow. Frank and I had done well, but never this well. Jason, a financial director for a major corporation, had surpassed his father's success by his early 30s. Natalie answered the door, her smile polite but not warm. My daughter-in-law was beautiful in that effortless way that certain women manage, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves, her slim figure draped in what I assumed was an expensive casual outfit. "Essie, come in," she said, using my first name as she always had, despite my gentle suggestions early in their marriage that Mom would be fine. "Thank you for having me, Natalie," I replied, stepping into their immaculate foyer. "The house looks beautiful as always." "We just had the living room redecorated," she said, leading me through to their open-concept main floor. The designer finally delivered the last pieces last week. The space was indeed stunning, though too minimalist for my taste, all clean lines and neutral colors with the occasional pop of blue. It looked like a home where no one actually lived, more like a showroom designed to impress visitors. Jason emerged from what I knew was his home office, dressed in business casual attire despite being home for the evening. He gave me a quick hug, the kind where barely any body contact is made, then gestured toward their dining area. "Perfect timing, Mom. Dinner's just about ready." Dinner was a catered affair, which Natalie presented as if she had prepared it herself. The conversation remained superficial, focused mainly on Jason's recent promotion and an upcoming vacation they were planning to the Maldives. No one mentioned my situation until we were nearly finished with dessert. "So," Jason finally said, setting down his espresso cup, "Dad mentioned you two sold the house." The casual way he referenced Frank as if nothing had changed stung more than it should have. "Yes," I replied. "The sale closed last week. I've been staying at a hotel while looking for an apartment." "I'm surprised you didn't have a place lined up before the sale," Natalie commented, her tone suggesting this was a failure of planning on my part rather than a result of my circumstances. "The market moves quickly," I explained, "and there are challenges when you're in my position." "What position is that?" Jason asked. "Single, older, limited income." Each word felt like an admission of failure. Jason and Natalie exchanged a glance I couldn't quite interpret. "How long do you think you'll need to find something?" Jason asked. I took a deep breath. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. I'm wondering if I could stay here just for a short while. A week or two at most, just until I can secure a place." The silence that followed was excruciating. Jason looked at Natalie, clearly waiting for her to respond first. She maintained a neutral expression, but I could see the reluctance in her eyes. "We do have the guest room," Jason finally said, though his tone lacked enthusiasm. "Actually," Natalie interjected quickly, "my grandmother is coming to stay with us next week. She'll be in the guest room." "Your grandmother?" I asked, surprised. "I didn't realize she was visiting." "It was a recent development," Natalie replied smoothly. "She's considering moving closer to us, so she's coming to look at some properties in the area." Jason cleared his throat. "The couch in the den pulls out. It's quite comfortable. You could use that for a short stay." A pull-out couch. My son, who lived in a 5-bedroom house, was offering his mother a pull-out couch while his wife's grandmother got a proper guest room. I swallowed hard, fighting back the hurt. "That would be fine," I said quietly. "I appreciate it, Jason. It's just temporary," he added quickly. "We don't want Natalie's grandmother to think we're showing favoritism or anything." Favoritism between his mother and his wife's grandmother. I nodded mutely, no longer trusting myself to speak without revealing how deeply his words had wounded me. After dinner, Jason showed me to the den, a small room off the main living area that primarily served as a TV room. The couch was indeed a pull-out, though it looked old relative to the rest of their furnishings. "There are extra blankets in this cabinet," he said, opening a door to reveal a few neatly folded throws. "The bathroom is down the hall on the right." "Thank you," I said, setting my small suitcase beside the couch. "I really appreciate this, Jason." He nodded, already turning to leave. "We usually have breakfast around 7. Feel free to help yourself if you're up earlier." That first night on the pull-out couch was one of the longest of my life. The mattress was thin with a metal bar that pressed into my back regardless of how I positioned myself. The blankets Jason had provided were decorative rather than functional, too light to provide real warmth. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had unraveled so completely. In the dark quiet of that unfamiliar room, I allowed myself to acknowledge what I had been avoiding. My son did not want me there. The boy I had nursed through chickenpox and heartbreaks, whose homework I had helped with and whose games I had never missed, had offered me a lumpy couch as if it were a tremendous favor. What had happened to the sweet boy who once made me Mother's Day cards with glitter that got everywhere? When had he become this cold, distant man who treated his mother like an inconvenient acquaintance? I finally drifted off sometime after 2, only to be awakened at 5:30 by sounds from the kitchen. Wrapping one of the thin blankets around my shoulders, I ventured out to investigate. In the kitchen, illuminated only by the light above the stove, stood an elegant older woman I had never seen before. She was arranging items on a breakfast tray, humming softly to herself. At my entrance, she looked up, startled. "Oh, you must be Jason's mother," she said, recovering quickly. Her voice carried the refined accent of old money and good schools. "Yes, I'm Essie," I replied, suddenly conscious of my rumpled appearance and sleep-tousled hair. "And you are—" "Barbara Richmond," she replied, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Natalie's mother." Natalie's mother, I struggled to hide my confusion. No one had mentioned that Natalie's mother was staying with them as well. "It's nice to meet you," I said automatically. "I didn't realize you were visiting too." Barbara's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched slightly. "I live here, dear. Have for the past 8 months, since my husband passed." She lived here in my son's house for 8 months. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Jason had never mentioned this arrangement during our infrequent calls. His own mother was sleeping on a pull-out couch while his mother-in-law had apparently taken up permanent residence. "I see," I managed to say. "I'm sorry about your husband." Barbara nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you. Now, would you mind putting on some coffee? I like to bring Natalie and Jason their first cup in bed." The request, or rather command, was delivered with such casual authority that I found myself moving toward the coffee maker before I had even processed her words. I was being asked to make coffee for this woman to serve to my son and his wife. As I measured out the coffee grounds, Barbara continued arranging her tray, adding fresh fruit and what looked like homemade muffins. "So," she said conversationally, "I understand you're recently divorced." The statement held no real sympathy, just curiosity wrapped in politeness. "Yes," I replied simply, "after 35 years." "Such a shame when marriages end after so long," she commented, though her tone suggested she found it more interesting than tragic. "Natalie tells me it was quite sudden." Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps drew our attention. Jason appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work, despite the early hour. "Morning," he said, seeming surprised to find us both in the kitchen. "You're up early, Mom." "The couch," I explained with a small smile. "It takes some getting used to." Jason nodded distractedly, then turned to Barbara with a warm smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. "Morning, Mom," he said, kissing her cheek affectionately. "You didn't have to get up so early." "Mom." He called her Mom. The word pierced me like a physical pain, sharp and sudden. My son, my only child, had given my title to another woman. "I wanted to make sure you had a good breakfast before your meeting," Barbara replied, patting his cheek. "The Henderson account is important." The casual way she referenced his work, her clear knowledge of his schedule, only deepened my sense of exclusion. This woman knew more about my son's daily life than I did. Natalie joined us moments later, wrapped in an expensive-looking silk robe. She greeted her mother with a hug and Jason with a kiss, then noticed me standing by the coffee maker. "Oh, good morning, Essie," she said, as if just remembering I was there. "Did you sleep all right?" "Fine, thank you," I lied. The four of us settled at the kitchen island, though there was nothing natural about the arrangement. Barbara and Natalie sat side by side with Jason next to his wife. I perched on the remaining stool, feeling like an afterthought. "We're going to look at that apartment today, Mom," Jason said to Barbara. "The real estate agent can meet us at 11. "Apartment?" I asked before I could stop myself. Natalie smiled brightly. "We're buying Mom a place in the residences at Park Avenue. It's that new luxury development downtown overlooking the river." "How nice," I said faintly, the implication of this news sinking in slowly. My son was buying his mother-in-law an apartment, an expensive apartment based on the location they were describing, while his own mother slept on a pull-out couch. "It's unnecessary, really," Barbara said with a wave of her hand. "I'm perfectly comfortable here." "You deserve your own space, Mom," Natalie insisted, "and it's so close that we can see each other every day." "Besides," Jason added, "with the baby coming, we'll need the extra room here." The baby, I felt as if I had stumbled into some alternate reality where everyone knew important details of my son's life, except me. "You're pregnant?" I asked Natalie, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. Natalie and Jason exchanged a glance. "We were going to tell you at dinner last night," Jason said, having the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "But then we got sidetracked with your situation." My situation. As if my divorce and homelessness were an inconvenient distraction from their real lives. "Congratulations," I said, summoning a smile. "That's wonderful news." "Thank you," Natalie replied, her hand moving protectively to her still flat stomach. "We're due in February." I would be a grandmother. The thought should have filled me with joy, but instead it brought a fresh wave of pain. Would I be allowed to be part of this child's life, or would Barbara claim that role too, as she seemed to have claimed everything else? "So, Essie," Barbara said, changing the subject, "Jason mentioned you're looking for an apartment. Any luck so far?" "Not yet," I admitted. "The rental market is challenging on a limited budget." "Well, I'm sure something will turn up," she replied dismissively. "Though at your age, perhaps a retirement community would be more suitable." "A retirement community. I was 58, not 80. "I'm not ready for that just yet," I said, forcing a light tone. "I'm actually hoping to return to nursing, at least part-time." "At your age?" Barbara's surprise seemed genuine. "Isn't nursing quite physically demanding?" Before I could respond, Jason intervened. "Mom, have you contacted a real estate agent specifically for seniors? They might have more appropriate options." I felt my face grow warm. "Jason, I'm not elderly. I'm looking for a regular apartment, not assisted living. An uncomfortable silence followed. Jason checked his watch and stood up. I should get going. Big meeting this morning. He turned to Barbara. We'll pick you up at 10:30 for the apartment viewing. She nodded, and he kissed her cheek again before kissing Natalie goodbye. Mom, he said to me as an afterthought, feel free to use the house today for your apartment search. Wi-Fi password is on the fridge. With that, he was gone, leaving me with the distinct impression that I had somehow become a guest in his life rather than a permanent fixture. After breakfast, Natalie retreated to her home office for a few quick calls, and Barbara announced she was going to get ready for her apartment viewing. I was left alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the remains of a family gathering where I had been merely an observer. Out of habit, I began clearing the dishes. As I loaded the dishwasher, I noticed a glossy brochure on the counter partially hidden beneath a placemat. The Residences at Park Avenue, the cover proclaimed in elegant script. Curiosity getting the better of me, I opened it. The apartments featured were stunning with floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, and panoramic views of the river. A price list was stapled to the inside cover. The smallest unit started at $1.2 million. My son was buying his mother-in-law a $1.2 million apartment while I slept on a pull-out couch with a metal bar digging into my spine. I closed the brochure and returned it exactly as I had found it, then retreated to the den, my temporary shelter in what increasingly felt like a hostile environment. That afternoon, while everyone was out, I used Jason's Wi-Fi to search for jobs. My nursing license was still active, though I hadn't practiced in years. Most positions required recent experience, but a few seemed open to returning professionals. I submitted several applications, trying not to feel discouraged by the gaps in my resume. Around 4, the front door opened, and I heard excited voices. Barbara, Jason, and Natalie returned from their apartment, hunting, sounding jubilant. Mom, it's perfect for you, Natalie was saying as they entered. The light in the living room is exactly what you wanted. And that view, Jason added, worth every penny. They came into the living room where I had relocated with my laptop. Their faces registered mild surprise at finding me there, as if they had forgotten my presence in their home. Oh, Essie, Barbara said with a smile that seemed almost pitying. You should have seen this apartment. Absolutely divine. We bought it, Jason announced proudly. Made an offer on the spot and they accepted. Congratulations. I said the word tasting bitter in my mouth. That was fast. When you know, Barbara replied with a satisfied smile. And it's important to move quickly in this market. The casual reference to my own housing difficulties was not lost on me. Speaking of which, I said carefully, I wondered if I might talk to you, Jason, about my own situation. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face, but he nodded. Sure, Mom. Let me just change and we can talk in my office. 20 minutes later, I sat across from my son in his home office, a room larger than the entire apartment I had been looking at earlier that day. He leaned back in his leather chair, waiting for me to speak. I wondered, I began trying to keep my voice steady, if you might be willing to help me find a place. Something stable like you're doing for Barbara. Jason's expression hardened slightly. That's different, Mom. Different how? I asked, genuinely wanting to understand. Barbara is family, he replied, as if that explained everything. The words cut deep. And I'm not, Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it momentarily took my breath away. Of course you are, but Barbara has been here for us. She moved in to help when Natalie's father died. She cooks. She helps around the house. She's invested in our lives. I would have been here too, Jason, if you had asked, or even told me you needed help. You were married to Dad, he said, as if that somehow precluded me from being involved in his life. And now I'm not, I replied, and I need help. Jason's jaw tightened. Look, you can stay here for a few more days, but this is temporary, Mom. We have our own lives, our own family to consider. I am your family, Jason, I said quietly. I'm your mother. And you chose to divorce Dad. He snapped, the accusation finally surfacing. You chose to disrupt everything. I stared at him, stunned by the unfairness of his words. Is that what you think happened? That I chose this? Dad told me how it went down. How you've been unhappy for years, how nothing he did was ever good enough. Frank, of course. Frank had been poisoning our son against me. That's not what happened, Jason. No, his voice was cold. Dad said you threatened divorce if he didn't retire early, that you wanted to control his life like you always have, that you were jealous of his success. Each word was like a slap. The narrative Frank had created bore no resemblance to our reality, but it was clear Jason had accepted it completely. Jason, your father was having an affair. For years, he hid money offshore. He planned his exit from our marriage methodically, deliberately. My son's expression didn't change. That's not what he told me. And you believe him over me. The pain in my voice was unmistakable. He's never lied to me before. I took a deep breath, fighting back tears. Would you like to see the evidence? The investigator's report, the financial documents, the text messages. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, quickly replaced by defensive anger. I don't want to be in the middle of this, Mom. Whatever happened between you and Dad is between you, but you can't expect me to bankroll your new single lifestyle. Bankroll my... I couldn't even finish the sentence. Jason, I'm asking for help finding a safe place to live, not for you to support me indefinitely. And I'm offering you the couch for a few more days, he replied, standing to indicate our conversation was over. If you need comfort, Mom, maybe you should have stayed married. The words hit with the force of a physical blow. I sat there stunned as my own son looked down at me with Frank's eyes, Frank's dismissive expression. I see, I finally managed to say, rising on unsteady legs. Thank you for your honesty. I left his office with what dignity I could muster, retreating to the den where my suitcase sat, untouched beside the pull-out couch. As I sank down onto the thin mattress, the reality of my situation became painfully clear. I was not just homeless, I was familyless. My husband had abandoned me, and now my son had as well. For the first time since the divorce began, I allowed myself to cry without restraint, muffling my sobs with a decorative pillow that, like everything else in this house, looked better than it functioned. The next morning, I woke early again, determined to avoid another uncomfortable encounter with Barbara. I dressed quickly and quietly, then slipped out to the backyard patio with my phone. I needed advice from someone who might actually care about my well-being. Laura answered on the third ring, her voice still raspy with sleep. Essie, is everything okay? It's not even 6 yet. Laura had been my friend since Jason started kindergarten. Our sons played soccer together, and we had bonded over sideline conversations and shared carpools. Unlike many of my other friendships, this one had survived my divorce, though Frank had always found Laura too outspoken for his taste. I'm sorry for calling so early, I said quietly. I needed to talk. Where are you? You sound like you're whispering. I'm at Jason's, on his patio. I didn't want to wake anyone. Jason's, I thought you were staying at the extended stay while apartment hunting. I explained the situation briefly, ending with Jason's callous comment about comfort and marriage. That little shit, Laura said with characteristic bluntness. After everything you've done for him. I don't understand, Laura. This isn't the son I raised. He was always such a compassionate child. Now he's treating me like I'm some distant acquaintance asking for a handout while he buys his mother-in-law a luxury apartment. Laura was silent for a moment. You really don't know, do you? Know what? What Frank's been telling Jason? About you, about the marriage, about the divorce? A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Jason mentioned something yesterday, that Frank told him I threatened divorce if he didn't retire early, that I was controlling. Laura's sigh was heavy with resignation. It's worse than that, Essie. Frank has been poisoning Jason against you for years. Years, but we only separated 6 months ago. This started long before the separation. Remember when Jason was in college and Frank started taking him on those father-son fishing trips? I did remember. After years of minimal involvement in Jason's life, Frank had suddenly developed an interest in spending time with our son during his college breaks. I had been pleased thinking Frank was finally making an effort to strengthen their relationship. Frank used those trips to plant seeds, Laura continued. He told me about it at the Andersons' Christmas party a few years ago when he had too much to drink. He was proud of it, Essie, said he was making sure Jason knew the truth about his mother. The truth? I echoed, my voice barely audible. Frank's version of it. That you were cold, unaffectionate, that you never supported his career, that you spent his hard-earned money frivolously while contributing nothing yourself, that you constantly nagged and criticized him. Each accusation felt like a knife twisting in my heart. That's not true. None of it is true. I know that. But Jason has been hearing this narrative for years, Essie, from his father whom he admires and wants to please. But he lived with us. He saw our marriage firsthand. Children see what they want to see, Laura said gently. And by the time Frank started this campaign, Jason was already in college, living away from home. His view of your marriage was limited to what he observed during breaks and holidays when everyone was on their best behavior. Frank told our son I was cold and unaffectionate. I couldn't get past this particular accusation. I was the one who was there for every fever, every nightmare, every heartbreak. Frank was barely present. Men like Frank rewrite history to justify their actions, Laura said. He probably believes his own lies at this point. I thought about all the soccer games, school plays, and parent-teacher conferences I had attended alone because Frank was working late or traveling. The countless dinners I had kept warm in the oven only to eventually wrap them in foil and put them in the refrigerator when Frank called to say he wouldn't be home until after midnight. Does Natalie believe these things too? I asked suddenly, understanding her coolness toward me from the beginning of their relationship. Probably. Jason would have repeated what his father told him, and Natalie would have accepted it as fact. After all, why would a son lie about his own mother? The realization was devastating. Not only had Frank stolen my financial security and betrayed our marriage vows, but he had also robbed me of my relationship with my son, and, by extension, my future grandchild. What do I do now, Laura? I asked, feeling more lost than ever. You fight back, she said firmly, not with anger or accusations, but with truth. You need to talk to Jason, show him evidence if you have it, make him see what really happened. He doesn't want to listen. He said he doesn't want to be in the middle. He is in the middle, whether he likes it or not, and he needs to hear your side, the real story. As we continued talking, formulating a plan, the patio door slid open behind me. Jason stood there in his running clothes, surprise evident on his face. I need to go, I told Laura quickly. I'll call you later. I ended the call and turned to face my son. Good morning, you're up early? Morning run, he replied, gesturing to his outfit. Part of my routine. Another detail of his life I hadn't known. How many other routines, preferences, and habits had developed in the years we had grown apart. Jason, I said impulsively, we need to talk, really talk, about your father, about the divorce, about what actually happened. He frowned, already shaking his head. Mom, I told you I don't want to get involved in your marital problems. You're already involved, I replied, standing my ground. You've been involved since your father started telling you his version of events years ago. Now I'm asking for the chance to tell you mine. Dad doesn't lie to me, Jason said, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Everyone lies sometimes, Jason, especially when they're trying to justify hurting someone they once promised to love forever. He looked at me for a long moment, then glanced at his watch. I have a meeting at 9. I can give you 30 minutes after my run. It wasn't much, but it was something. Thank you. I'll be here. As Jason jogged down the garden path toward the gate that led to their neighborhood's walking trail, I sent a quick text to Laura. He's going to listen. I hope. An hour later, Jason and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The house was quiet, Natalie having taken Barbara to a spa appointment. My son looked uncomfortable, his posture stiff and defensive. 30 minutes, he reminded me, setting a timer on his phone. I nodded, taking a deep breath. First, I want to show you something. From my handbag, I removed a manila envelope containing copies of the documents my lawyer had compiled during the divorce proceedings. I spread them across the table, financial statements showing Frank's hidden accounts. The private investigator's report with dated photographs of Frank and Amy together, text message transcripts, and finally a copy of our final settlement agreement. What is all this? Jason asked, eyeing the papers warily. Evidence, I replied simply, of what actually happened between your father and me. I started with the financial documents explaining how Frank had systematically moved assets offshore over several years preparing for a divorce, long before he ever mentioned it to me. He hid $2 million, Jason. Money that legally should have been considered marital property. Money I was entitled to half of after 35 years of marriage. Jason picked up one of the statements, his brow furrowing as he studied the transactions. As a financial professional himself, he understood the implications immediately. "This is from 5 years ago," he said, pointing to a transfer date. Yes, he'd been planning his exit for a long time. Next, I showed him the private investigator's report documenting Frank's affair with Amy. 3 years, I said quietly. That's how long they were together before he asked for the divorce. All those business trips, all those late nights at the office. He was with her. Jason's face had gone pale. Dad said you were the one who wanted the divorce, that you threatened him with it because you were unhappy with his work hours. I shook my head sadly. That's not true, Jason. I found out about Amy by accident, a text message on his phone. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He said he wanted his freedom, that I was boring, that I had let myself go. But he told me you were cold, that you never showed affection, that you criticized everything he did. Is that how you remember me, Jason, as a cold mother, as someone who withheld affection? He looked down at his hands. No, he admitted softly. You were always there, always caring. I was the same way with your father until he pushed me away, until he made it clear that my affection was unwanted, that my efforts were unappreciated. I showed him the settlement agreement next, pointing out how little I had received after decades of marriage. He kept the retirement accounts, Jason, all of them. His lawyer argued that since I hadn't worked full-time, I hadn't contributed to them, as if raising our child and maintaining our home for 35 years counted for nothing. Why didn't your lawyer fight harder? Jason asked, his financial mind focusing on the practical aspects. We did fight, but Frank had been planning this for years. He had documentation witnesses, a narrative that made me look like a spendthrift who contributed nothing to the marriage. And his lawyer was one of the best in the city, far more experienced than mine. Jason was silent for a long moment, staring at the documents spread before him. Then he looked up, his expression troubled. Why are you showing me all this? Because I want you to know the truth, because I want my son back. Dad said you were never interested in my life, that you only called when you wanted something. The accusation stung, especially given how often my calls to Jason went unanswered or were cut short. That's not true, I said firmly. I called you every Sunday for years, Jason. Sometimes you answered, sometimes you didn't. I sent birthday cards, Christmas gifts, emails asking about your life. The responses grew shorter and less frequent until they almost stopped entirely. He said you disapproved of Natalie, that you thought she wasn't good enough for me. Another lie. I have never said anything negative about Natalie, ever. I was thrilled when you found someone who made you happy. Jason rubbed his temples, looking suddenly exhausted. I don't know what to believe anymore. Believe the evidence in front of you, I said gently. Believe your own memories, not the ones your father tried to rewrite for you. Why would he lie like this? What would be the point? To justify his actions, to avoid feeling guilty about abandoning his wife of 35 years for a younger woman, to ensure you would side with him in the divorce. Jason picked up his phone, his expression hardening with sudden resolve. I need to talk to him. Now. I hadn't expected this immediate reaction. Now. Jason confirmed, already dialing. He put the phone on speaker and placed it between us on the table. Frank answered on the fourth ring, his voice jovial. Jason, good to hear from you, son. How are things? Not great, Dad, Jason replied, his tone controlled but tight. I'm sitting here with Mom looking at some interesting documents from your divorce. There was a moment of silence before Frank responded, his voice noticeably cooler. I see. And what might those be? Financial statements showing offshore accounts you opened years ago, photos of you and Amy together dating back 3 years before you asked Mom for a divorce, text messages, settlement details. Another pause, longer this time. Jason, divorce is complicated. There are always two sides to every story. That's exactly what I'm realizing, Jason replied. I've been hearing only one side for years, your side. Now I'm wondering how much of it was true. Your mother was never interested in our finances, Frank said dismissively. She left everything to me. Because she trusted you, Jason countered. And you abused that trust. This is between your mother and me, Jason. It doesn't concern you. It does concern me when you've been feeding me lies about her for years. When those lies have damaged my relationship with my mother. Frank's tone hardened. I never lied to you. No. You told me Mom was cold and unaffectionate. That she criticized everything you did. That she threatened you with divorce if you didn't retire early. That she was never interested in my life. That was how I experienced it, Frank insisted. Your mother and I had very different perceptions of our marriage. Perceptions don't explain hidden bank accounts, Dad, or a 3-year affair. Frank's response was immediate and defensive. Amy understands me in a way your mother never did. She supports my ambitions. Amy is 34, Dad, half your age. Age is just a number. We connect on a deeper level. We're even talking about having a child of our own. I watched as Jason's expression shifted from anger to shock. A child? You're 60, Dad. And healthier than most 40-year-olds, Frank replied with audible pride. Amy and I have our whole lives ahead of us. While Mom is sleeping on my pull-out couch because she can't afford an apartment, Jason said, his voice rising, because you hid assets and cheated her out of a fair settlement. Your mother made her choices, Jason. I made mine. As men, we need to stick together on these things. The naked manipulation in that statement seemed to be the final straw for Jason, his face flushed with anger. We're done here, Dad, he said abruptly, and we're done, period, until you take responsibility for what you did. Jason, wait, Frank began, but my son had already ended the call. For several long moments, we sat in silence. Jason stared at the phone, his expression a complex mixture of anger, hurt, and disillusionment. I wanted to reach out to him to offer comfort as I had when he was a child, but I held back, unsure if my touch would be welcome. Finally, Jason looked up at me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I'm so sorry. The simple apology broke something in both of us. I moved around the table and embraced my son for the first time in years, a real embrace, not the perfunctory hug he had offered upon my arrival. He clung to me like he had as a child after a bad dream, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. It's okay, I murmured, stroking his hair. It's going to be okay. We stayed like that for several minutes, mother and son reconnecting through shared pain and the beginning of healing. When we finally pulled apart, Jason looked simultaneously older and younger, as if a weight had been lifted, even as a new understanding settled upon him. I believed him, he said, his voice rough with emotion. All those years I believed everything he said about you. I let it change how I saw you, how I treated you. He's your father, I replied gently. Of course you believed him. You wanted his approval, his love. That's no excuse for how I've treated you, especially now when you needed me most. We can't change the past, Jason. We can only move forward. He nodded slowly, then looked at me with sudden determination. The apartment, the one we're buying for Barbara. It should be yours. The offer touched me deeply, but I shook my head. No, Jason, that would only create more conflict. Barbara is Natalie's mother, and she's important to both of you. But you're my mother, he insisted. And I've failed you completely. You haven't failed me, I assured him. We lost our way for a while, that's all. What matters is that we found our way back to each other. Jason squeezed my hand, then looked at his watch and grimaced. I've missed my meeting. I should call in. Go, I said. We can talk more later. I'm not going anywhere. As Jason left to make his call, I remained at the kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of my broken marriage. Yet for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. My son knew the truth now. He had chosen to believe me, to stand by me. It was more than I had dared to hope for when I woke up that morning. The next few days brought changes I could never have anticipated. Jason explained everything to Natalie that evening after Barbara had gone to bed. At first, she was skeptical, unwilling to believe that the charming Frank she had known since college could have been so manipulative and deceitful. But the evidence was irrefutable and Jason's conviction unshakable. I don't understand why he would do this, Natalie said when she finally came to talk to me, her expression troubled. What did he gain by turning Jason against you? Control, I explained. As long as Jason believed his version of events, Frank never had to face the consequences of his actions. He could continue being the good guy, the victim in everyone's eyes. Natalie nodded slowly, her hand resting on her barely perceptible baby bump. I'm sorry, Essie, for believing him, for how we've treated you. You didn't know, I assured her. You trusted your husband as you should have. Still, I should have questioned it more. The way he talked about you never matched the woman I saw at family gatherings. You were always kind, always interested in our lives. This admission, this recognition of who I truly was, meant more to me than she could possibly know. Barbara, predictably, was less receptive to the change in family dynamics. When Jason informed her that plans had changed and they would be helping me find an apartment instead of purchasing the residences for her, she reacted with cold fury. I see how it is, she said, her elegant features hardening. Blood will always win out over marriage, won't it? This isn't about blood versus marriage, Barbara, Jason replied firmly. This is about righting a wrong. My mother was treated unfairly, and I contributed to that. I need to make it right. And what about my apartment, the one you promised me? We'll still help you find a place, Natalie assured her mother. Just not that particular apartment. Barbara turned to her daughter with an expression of betrayal. I moved here to be close to you. I gave up my home, my friends, my entire life in Connecticut. And we appreciate that, Natalie said gently. But this situation with Essie is different. She didn't choose to start over. She was forced into it by circumstances beyond her control. Circumstances she could have prevented if she'd been a better wife, Barbara muttered, unable to relinquish her judgment entirely. I chose not to respond to this, Barb. Barbara's opinion of me was the least of my concerns at this point. What mattered was that my son and his wife now understood the truth, and our relationship was on the path to healing. Over the next week, with Jason's help, I found a small but comfortable apartment in a safe neighborhood not far from their home. It wasn't luxurious by any means, but it was clean, well-maintained, and most importantly, mine. Jason insisted on paying the security deposit and first 3 months' rent, giving me time to find employment without immediate financial pressure. It's the least I can do, Mom, he said when I protested. Please let me help you get back on your feet. I accepted his help with gratitude, recognizing it as the gesture of reconciliation it was meant to be. The day I moved into my new apartment was bittersweet. On one hand, it represented independence and a fresh start. On the other, it was a tangible reminder of how much my life had changed in such a short time. The few possessions I had kept from my marital home looked sparse in the new space, emphasizing all that had been lost. But there were bright spots, too. Laura helped me decorate with some secondhand furniture she found at estate sales. Jason and Natalie brought houseplants and kitchen essentials. Even my former colleagues from the clinic sent a care package with neighborhood restaurant menus and gift cards. Most encouraging of all was the job offer I received from a local medical practice looking for an experienced nurse to work with their geriatric patients. The position was part-time initially, with the potential to become full-time as I reacclimated to the profession. The salary wasn't substantial, but combined with my alimony, it would allow me to support myself modestly, but comfortably. A month after moving into my apartment, I received an unexpected visitor. Frank's knock on my door was hesitant, nothing like the confident rap I had known for 35 years. When I opened the door, I barely recognized the man standing before me. He looked older, diminished somehow, with new lines etched into his face and a defeated slump to his shoulders. Essie, he said, his voice lacking its usual authority. Can I come in just for a few minutes? Against my better judgment, I stepped aside to let him enter. Curiosity, more than anything, motivated my decision. What could he possibly want after everything that had happened? Frank stood awkwardly in my small living room, taking in the modest furnishings with an unreadable expression. Nice place, he offered finally, though his tone suggested otherwise. It suits me, I replied neutrally. Why are you here, Frank? He sighed heavily, running a hand through hair that seemed grayer than I remembered. Amy left me. The statement hung in the air between us. I waited, offering neither sympathy nor satisfaction. She found out about someone else, he continued after a moment. Younger, an intern at the firm. So Frank had cheated on his affair partner just as he had cheated on me. Some patterns never changed. I'm sorry to hear that. I said more out of ingrained politeness than genuine feeling. Frank looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. The thing is, Essie, it made me realize what I threw away. What we had was real. 35 years of history of building a life together. You were always there for me, always loyal. I felt a sudden wave of exhaustion. This visit wasn't about apologizing or making amends. It was about Frank needing a safety net now that his plans had fallen apart. What exactly are you saying, Frank? He moved closer, attempting to take my hands. I stepped back. I'm saying I made a mistake, he said earnestly. A terrible mistake. I want to come home, Essie, back to you. We could start over. There was a time not so long ago when these words would have meant everything to me, when I would have given anything to hear Frank say he wanted our marriage back. But that time had passed, and the woman I had become in the aftermath of his betrayal no longer needed his validation or approval. There is no home to come back to, Frank, I said quietly. You made sure that when you hid assets, when you lied to our son about me for years, when you chose another woman over your wife of 3.5 decades. People make mistakes, he insisted. I know I hurt you, but we could work through it, for Jason's sake, if nothing else. He needs his parents together, especially with the baby coming. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost laughable. Jason is an adult, Frank, and he knows the truth now, all of it. Frank's expression darkened. You turned him against me. No, I corrected firmly. You did that yourself when you lied to him, when you used him as a pawn in your game. All I did was show him evidence of what actually happened. So that's it. 35 years thrown away because of one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, I reminded him. It was years of deception, of emotional abandonment, of preparing for a future that didn't include me while pretending everything was fine. And now that future hasn't worked out as planned, you want to come back to your safety net, to me. Frank's facade of contrition fell away, revealing the anger beneath. You'll regret this, Essie. You're 58 years old, starting over with nothing. Who's going to want you now? The question was meant to wound, to make me doubt myself and my decision, but instead it confirmed that I was making the right choice in refusing his offer. I want me Frank, I replied with a calm I didn't know I possessed. For the first time in decades, I'm living for myself, not for a husband who never appreciated my sacrifices. And I've discovered that I'm stronger than you ever gave me credit for. He stood there, momentarily speechless, clearly not having anticipated this response. I think you should leave now, I said, moving toward the door. I wish you well, Frank. I really do, but our life together is over. After he left, I sat on my small balcony with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. There was a sense of closure in that encounter, a final chapter written in a story that had defined most of my adult life. Frank's visit, rather than unsettling me, had reinforced my newfound independence and self-respect. That evening, Jason called to invite me to Sunday dinner, a new tradition we had established since our reconciliation. Natalie's making lasagna, he said, and we have some nursery color samples we'd like your opinion on. The simple inclusion, the acknowledgement that my opinion mattered, filled me with quiet joy. I'd love that, I replied. Should I bring dessert? Always, Jason laughed. Barbara is still complaining about the store-bought pie from last week. Barbara had remained a part of their household, though the dynamics had shifted significantly. She had eventually accepted that she would not be getting the luxury apartment she had been promised, settling instead for a more modest condo in the same building where I now lived. The irony was not lost on any of us. While she was still cool toward me, a grudging respect had developed between us, particularly after I helped her navigate a minor health scare, with calm efficiency drawing on my nursing experience. We would never be friends, but we had reached a detente for the sake of Jason and Natalie and the grandchild we would both cherish. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the same one who had stood in shock as Frank announced he wanted a divorce. There was a quiet confidence in her eyes, a self-possession that had been missing before. The pain of betrayal had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something else, something that had strengthened rather than weakened me. In losing what I thought was essential, I had found parts of myself that had been dormant for years. my career, my independence, my voice. I was reclaiming them all one day at a time. 1 year after that fateful day when my son offered me a spot on his couch, I stand in my apartment preparing for a celebration. Today marks not only the anniversary of my new beginning, but also the christening of my 3-month-old granddaughter, Emma Grace. Jason and Natalie have asked me to be her godmother, a role I accept with profound gratitude and joy. The past year has been one of remarkable healing and growth. My part-time nursing position became full-time after 6 months, and I recently received a promotion to charge nurse for the geriatric unit. The work is challenging but deeply satisfying, allowing me to use skills I feared had atrophied beyond recovery. My relationship with Jason has been rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. He calls regularly, not out of obligation, but genuine desire to connect. We have had many difficult conversations about the past, processing the hurt and misunderstandings that drove us apart. Each one has brought us closer, strengthened the bond that Frank nearly succeeded in severing completely. Natalie and I have developed a warm friendship, especially during her pregnancy, when my nursing background proved helpful in easing her concerns. She has apologized multiple times for believing Frank's lies about me, but I have assured her that no apology is necessary. We are family now, bound by love for Jason and little Emma, and that is all that matters. Even Barbara and I have reached an understanding of sorts. We will never be close, but we share a fierce devotion to Emma, and that common ground has softened the edges of our initial antipathy. She brings Emma to visit me on Tuesdays when Jason and Natalie both work late, a gesture of inclusion that speaks volumes about how far we've come. Frank remains on the periphery of our lives. His relationship with Jason is strained, but not severed entirely. They meet occasionally for lunch, keeping conversations light and focused on neutral topics. Jason has made it clear to his father that any attempt to manipulate or deceive will result in immediate consequences, a boundary that Frank, chastened by recent events, seems to respect. As for me, I have found an unexpected gift in this new chapter of life. Thomas, a widowed physician at the medical practice where I work. Our friendship began over shared coffee breaks and mutual professional respect, gradually deepening into something more. At 62, he has kind, thoughtful, and refreshingly honest qualities I now recognize as essential rather than optional in a relationship. Thomas understands that I am in no rush to remarry or even cohabitate. The independence I have fought so hard to establish is precious to me, and he respects my need to maintain it. We enjoy each other's company, share common interests, and support each other's goals. It is in many ways the healthiest relationship I have ever experienced. This evening, as I prepare to leave for the christening reception at Jason and Natalie's home, I pause to reflect on the journey that brought me here. From the devastation of divorce to the humiliation of sleeping on my son's couch, from the pain of familial rejection to the joy of reconciliation, every step has shaped the woman I am today. If there is a lesson in my experience, perhaps it is this: comfort can be a prison when it comes at the cost of truth and self-respect. The pull-out couch that once symbolized my lowest point became paradoxically the first step toward authentic freedom. In losing the life I thought I needed, I discovered the life I truly wanted. To those of you watching who may be facing your own moments of painful transformation, I offer this thought: trust yourself enough to walk through the fire. What awaits on the other side may be richer and more fulfilling than you can imagine right now. Have you ever had to start over in your life? Please share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to see more stories of resilience and renewal. And remember, sometimes the most uncomfortable places lead us to our greatest comfort. Thank you for listening, and may you find strength in whatever challenges you face today.